Hello, welcome to another episode of Unlocked. I'm Scott, and today we're talking to Mamie Kanfer Stewart, who is basically a meeting guru. So she is the founder of a company called Meeteor, which is MEET, because that's what she does. She is hyper-focused on this whole topic of meetings, delegation, and that's what we're going to talk about today. How many of us have been in meetings where we're like, why am I even here? Or why are we even having this meeting? Are we having this meeting just to have a meeting? If my calendar's not full of meetings, then I need to make it full of meetings to look like I'm productive and like I'm doing things. But how many of us at the end of the day are like, oh, please, not another meeting, like another day full of meetings? Like, how many of us look at our calendar tomorrow and go, oh, it's so full of meetings. I'm so stoked. Like, that's amazing. I can't wait to attend 8 meetings tomorrow. Even ones during lunch. Those are the best. The ones that take up my lunch. So excited. Right? Said no one. So we're going to talk about that with Mamie on the call today. So I hope you pay attention. She offers some really good tips and some advice and talks about her book. She talks about her podcast and some other assets there that we can all get to right now. So no further ado, let's get on with it. Here we come. Mamie Kanfer Stewart. Here we are today. I'm super excited. This is going to be fun because we all do stuff in meetings, and that's kind of what you talk about. So I'm stoked.
Awesome. I'm so excited to be here talking about meetings, which, yes, we all have to go to. And unfortunately, most of us hate.
Is this technically a meeting?
Well, I would say no. I think of meetings as more than just two people happening to be together. Some people might argue that yes, if you are doing something with someone else, it is therefore a meeting. I would say more like it could be a gathering as a collective terminology for ways we spend time with people.
Okay, fair. We'll call this a gathering. It's a gathering of two people, but we are gathering to just have a good conversation about meetings.
Yeah.
Fair enough? Okay, cool.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm stoked for this meeting. Like, this meeting's like, I'm all over this. This is going to be awesome. Tell us a little bit. So you had a book come out in 2017, Momentum, and give us a premise of that book. It's been a few years. A few things have happened since then. And hit really quick on that and how you're using that even today.
Sure. So in the early 2000 teens, I wanted to start a business. I had been kind of working in a couple different spaces, and I landed on this concept of meetings because my very first job out of college was working in my family business context. And I went to a bunch of meetings there, and they were great. I loved it. We always had really interesting conversations. There were always really well-planned agendas and facilitation techniques, and it just was awesome. And then my next kind of roles after that, I was like, what is wrong with this? Like, going to these meetings is just awful. And I started talking to people about their meetings, and it was amazing how this was a big trend. Like, almost every single person I spoke to, whether it was at a bar after work, with my friends, at just anywhere, somebody had a story. Everybody had a story about a terrible meeting they had been to that week, if not that day. And I was like, wow, this seems like a really big problem. And it's not that hard to fix. I've been in an environment that had really good meetings. So we got to be able to fix this. And that set me down a path of trying to understand what were these great practices that Gojo was using, and what are some of the other practices that people are using to make their meetings effective and productive and enjoyable. And that kind of evolved into a big focus on meetings and writing this book, Momentum, creating effective, engaging, and enjoyable meetings, and using that as a real platform to get organizations to think about how they hold their meetings and to train their managers and their leaders in meeting effectiveness skills, and to create a culture where meetings are a way to move work forward, not a place where people go for battling out power dynamics or to tick a box and look good in front of their boss or to just drain the life out of the day, which is, we're still working on that one.
Yeah, I would say so. So the okay, the biggest problem with meetings. What is the number one biggest problem if we're playing like Family Feud or whatever, right? Like the number one biggest problem with meetings.
Well, the way that I'm going to frame it is this: people don't know what they're trying to accomplish in a meeting. They know why we're gathering, right? But very few of us will just like schedule a meeting and be like, let's just show up for no reason. But the problem is that most people frame their reason in a way that doesn't actually tell you what you're trying to accomplish. They frame it as well, we need to review the results of the research we did, or we need to discuss the issue with the client that just came up, or we need to update the team on something. And you're like, great, okay, that's a good reason to meet, but what do you want to accomplish? Because after we've had a discussion, that could lead to a million different things. And how am I supposed to know if we actually got any work done if we talked, but that was it? So we're not framing our meetings with this idea that they're meant to accomplish something. And that accomplishment could be that we're just now all on the same page so that everybody on the team is running in the same direction. But it could also be that a decision was made, or some very clear next steps were identified of things that have to get done, or a million other things. So we have to start reshifting or kind of rethinking how we write that why are we having a meeting statement into what is this meeting going to achieve? And when we can do that, it will have so exponential impact on the meeting. So I'd say that's the biggest thing, is people just don't know why they're actually trying to meet.
Okay, fair enough. And I will also add on top of that, is the feeling of, why am I in this meeting? Right? Like it's like, okay, so I understand why we're having this, but why am I in this meeting? And it's sometimes it's like, which I've heard from my clients is, I mean, I didn't really have to be there, but like I have to have a presence there, or people wonder like where I was and wonder if I'm engaged, or what about that whole thing of like, why am I in this meeting scenario?
Yeah, so I think these things are connected. So first, if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish in your meeting, you don't know who to invite. And so you end up inviting the people that you think are supposed to be there, as opposed to people who actually need to be there. And secondly, we have a culture of FOMO, that if I'm not in the meeting, people are going to notice my absence, or I'm not going to have the information I need because no one's going to tell me after the meeting what was decided. Or if I don't show up, then a million other things are going to happen. And that the only acceptable reason to not be in a meeting is you're on vacation or you have another meeting, right? Like as if those are the only two reasons we could say no to a calendar invite. And the reality is like, no, we actually can say no for a lot of reasons. So you got to, if you're not sure why you're supposed to be somewhere, why you've been invited, you got to ask. And this is one of the tips I always give to people, because I'm like, you don't have to be the meeting leader to help make a good meeting. Everyone can be responsible for fostering an effective meeting. So if you don't know why you're there, just ask the meeting leader. Hey, I saw this calendar invite come through. I got a lot juggling my plate. I really like to be there. Can you just give me some context for what you hope I'm going to contribute in that meeting? Super simple. And the person will either say, hey, I hear you. You got a lot going on. Don't worry about it. Just, sit this one out. Well, we got it covered. Or here's specifically why I invited you and what I think you're going to bring to this meeting. And it just, you can say no to meetings. It is okay.
So what if John is constantly emailing me saying, why am I in this meeting? Why am I in this meeting? Why am I in this meeting? And it's like, he's constantly trying to like maybe get out of the meeting all the time. Like, how do we deal with John over here? Like, what's going on with that?
I love that. I hope John, exists in all these organizations, because if I got those emails from a team member, I would sit down with them and say, hey, I noticed that you're, it seems like this meeting isn't, the best use of your time. You keep asking why you're attending, and I'm not sure if I'm just not being clear why I'm inviting you, or, there's something else happening here. So let me tell you what this meeting is about. And then let's talk about, is this the best way for you to engage on this content? Or do you really need to be here? Right? Like read the tea leaves. If someone's asking you why they're here, maybe they shouldn't be there. And if they should be, maybe you're not explaining to them clearly, or you're not leading the meeting in a way that is taking advantage of the fact that they're spending that time with you.
or helps them feel valuable enough to want to be in that meeting in the first place. Maybe they kind of understand that they should be there. They just don't want to be there because they don't feel heard and they don't feel valued in the first place, right? So they're kind of trying to get out of it in a sense. So that's, you're right. Read the tea leaves, right? Is there something going on here deeper than just John trying to duck out again?
Absolutely. The other dimension to this is that we think about meetings as an event. It has a start time at 10 a.m. It has an end time at 11 a.m. Thank you, Google and Outlook, for making all of our meetings 1 hour instead of 55 minutes or 47 minutes or any other amount of minutes. But regardless, we think of meetings as an event. And that's just not the truth. Meetings are actually a cycle. There's a before phase, a during phase, and an after phase. And when meeting leaders start to think about meetings as a cycle and what happens of those phases, we can engage our team members in different ways. So before the meeting, I, as a meeting leader, need to figure out what's my desired outcome? What am I trying to achieve in this meeting? What do I need to do to prepare to make sure that this meeting is going to be effective and engaging? What do my participants need to know so that they can be best ready to come in and engage? And who do I need to talk to before the meeting, or who do I need to get input from before the meeting who doesn't actually need to be in the meeting? Like, maybe John doesn't actually need to be in the meeting. Maybe John could just read the pre-work materials, send me some thoughts by email, and be done. And that's it. He doesn't actually need to sit in the meeting. He just needs an opportunity to weigh in and share some thoughts before the meeting happens, so I can kind of hear his voice in the back of my mind as we're going through the discussion, or bring his voice into the room on his behalf. Then we have the meeting, and then we have the after, which again, maybe John doesn't need to be in the meeting. Maybe John just needs to be informed after. Maybe we just need to make sure that we're capturing our takeaways out of the meeting and sending them to John and other folks who need to know, so they can feel like, okay, I'm kept in the loop. I don't need to be there. I just need to have some confidence that people are going to tell me what's going on so that my work can stay aligned with the rest of the teams.
And talk to me about how this impacts culture overall, right? Like, meeting culture, how does that affect organizational culture? Like, are those two, I would assume they're pretty integrated.
Oh, yes. I like to think of meetings as a microcosm of your organization. So whatever dynamics are playing out in your meetings are playing out kind of on a macro level inside of your organizations, because meetings are like one critical form of how we collaborate. So if there's a lack of trust for people to speak up in your meetings, then there's definitely a lack of trust in the organization writ large, right? Assuming we're not talking about an individual manager who's got their own situation, right? But just kind of in general, if your organization's meetings are not engaging, if there are a lot of people just talking at each other, that's probably a communications thing that's happening larger than just your meetings. If there are power dynamics that are happening, or other kinds of unhealthy behaviors that are coming out in meetings, it's probably happening outside those meetings as well. So you can really see your meetings as an opportunity to create change. And this is one of the levers you can pull. If you start to address some of those factors in your meetings, you can start to see a ripple effect happening outside of your meetings, which is wonderful, because culture change is hard. So knowing that you don't have to change your whole culture, you could actually just change your meetings, and you'll start to see culture change kind of organically, is a really wonderful opportunity for people to invest in both improving meetings and culture change.
That's brilliant. Yeah, I love it. It's kind of seeing the symptom of the entire organization, right? And kind of diagnosing what's happening in this meeting is like, oh, that's interesting, like how that scales up. And that's awesome. I'm going to use that. That's brilliant. So so you talk about this kind of block of time that we have. I mean, I'm all over the place because I love this whole idea, right? And I'm just like going off. So if we talk about this block of time that we schedule for meetings, we forgot that we used to go to the bathroom and like get snacks and stretch right before between meetings. And so, it's like this culture now of like, oh my gosh, it's, we're doing this call here at what ended at 11:02 because it always goes over a few minutes. And then somebody's always getting on what, like, we'll sit on Zoom now for like till maybe 11:05 because we know somebody's just coming late to a meeting. And then they race over and come on to our meeting. And then we go over a few minutes. And it's just like this perpetual things of exhaustion, right? So what has that done to culture, right? Like this mentality of the pandemic. What did the pandemic do to meeting culture?
Yeah. I mean, so many things. So you're kind of taking a step back to thinking about what were meetings like before the pandemic. For most of us, meetings happened in person. Some people were meeting on Zoom, but it was not like the widespread norm that it is now. So a lot of meetings were happening in person. And people always trickled in late because you had to walk from your desk to wherever on the third floor and find the right meeting space. And you got to get the computer plugged in to, show the slides or whatever it is. So meetings kind of always start a little late, but they were kind of, it was not, it was kind of a lovely thing of like you chit chat with people. Maybe somebody brought snacks that were left over from their kid's birthday party so you could munch on something delicious, and it was not so bad that meetings started late. And there was a general kind of, culture like, okay, meetings end, maybe they end a little bit late, but it wasn't nearly as intense, I think. At least I wasn't hearing from my clients that, there was like a, we don't want to start too late and but we things run late. But generally it was kind of like, all right, nobody really wants to be in this meeting anyways. So let's make the best of it. Then when the pandemic hit and everything went on to Zoom, all of that went out the window. All of the fun things, right? The like, oh, I get to move my body. I've been sitting at my desk for 4 hours and now I got to go walk up some stairs. Now you're just like, I'm going to click another button and I haven't gotten up out of my seat in 7 hours, right? We lost some of that like nice stuff that happened. You can kind of chit chat with people on the start of a Zoom, but oftentimes it actually feels like two people are chit chatting and then everybody else is kind of observing their chit chat, which is really awkward. So we lost some of those nice things that we had in meetings. But the expectation is still the same. Meeting after meeting after meeting. Again, thank you, Google and Outlook, for making our defaults on the hour as opposed to, 55 minutes or anything else. So it really actually comes down to meeting leaders being more thoughtful about how we plan our agendas and how much time we need in the meeting and making sure that we're giving people space. I always tell people, assume you're going to start 5 minutes late because it's really hard to end on time. It's so much harder to end and even if you end on time when it's exactly 10:30, people still need to move. They need to go to the bathroom. They need to refill their water. So assume people are going to come a few minutes late and don't feel bad about it. Just build that into your agenda and start your next meeting. You can stay on the calendar starting at 10:30. Just know it's actually not going to start till 10:35. And just use that time to chat with people, have a funny conversation, share your weekends, and just plan to start a little bit late and do your best to end on time. And there's lots of tricks and tips to help you end on time. But we need to just anticipate that people are going to be, they're going to need time. We all need time.
Yeah. And yeah, it's kind of this thing where we forgot what it was like to interact because now Zoom and whatever meeting platform you're on, right, has become a production tool, right? Like we're here to get crap done. I'm not here to really talk to you, right? About like other stuff. Like I'm only on this call to make sure I'm productive and we're getting something done because it takes effort. Now it used to be like I turn over to the side and I tell somebody about my weekend, right? And just talk about, hey, what's going on, whatever. Now I can't do that. Now I have to actually schedule a call, make sure they get it on a Zoom, and then we talk, right? And it takes a lot of effort to do that. So not only has it kind of taken away this casual aspect of human interaction inside of meetings, but it's just like this whole thing that now it's just intentionality and productivity is what these tools are seen as now. They're not seen as interaction tools as far as getting to know you better. It's getting crap done.
Totally. And it's also mentally exhausting because we're seeing so much more detail. It's actually super fascinating when you see, right? Normally, if you're just looking in a room, maybe you're seeing three faces, but you're really only focusing on one. When you have a Zoom screen that has 6 or 7 or 8 faces, you're seeing like full faces, all their expressions, a lot more intensity and detail. And even though we're still only focusing on one person who's talking, there's a ton of information that is flying at our brains that it's trying to process in a way that when you're sitting in a room, your peripheral vision has kind of blocked out those other folks. And so your brain is not trying to sense in the same way what's happening there. But because it's on the screen right smack in front of us, our brain is processing. And it's overwhelming. So we're trying to be more productive. We're trying to stay engaged. We're not moving our bodies. We're taking in way more information than we're really, processing. And it's just a lot. And and we haven't exactly figured out, especially now as we're moving into this world of hybrid, where some people are in person and some people are going to be on video. And it's a whole other dynamic to try and balance the participation and create true engagement. Like we're kind of still trying to figure it out. And, when it comes to like the other cultural elements and building relationships, getting back to like, why are you having your meeting? What are you trying to accomplish? I've really encouraged people to have relationship only building time in their, like with either in a meeting or separately from a meeting with their team members, because we've lost all that quote water cooler talk, because you don't pass by someone in the hallway. You're not riding in the elevator with them. You're not chatting in the parking lot for a few minutes on your way out. We need those times, and we can't just jam them into meetings, especially on Zoom, and hope that it kind of covers it, right? Those few minutes when you're waiting, as I said, like it's so often two people chit-chatting and everyone else kind of sitting there watching two people chit-chat, right? You can't use that as a makeup. So you either have to intentionally build in some check-in time and say, we're going to take the first 10 minutes and we're going to have natural conversation. We're going to go into breakout rooms and let people just chit chat with each other for a few minutes, or we're going to do something together collectively that's designed around relationship building, but we got to schedule it into the meeting or schedule a different meeting, right? Just put 15 minutes on your calendar with someone once a week to just have a coffee date, or send them things back and forth on Slack, little videos or photos or other things where it make you feel like, oh yeah, I know what that person did over the weekend because I saw their picture of their kid's baseball game, or I saw the Halloween cookies that they decorated, or I saw a photo from the concert they went to. And so even though you're not necessarily having the engagement, you still get to feel like you're staying connected, right? It's kind of like the Facebook effect, where you feel like you know someone, even though you haven't talked to them in a decade.
Totally. You know what else is fun? Is seeing people's profiles. So do you mind turning to the side for me really quick? I'm just super curious. I've never seen your profile. Look at that. So look, I'll show you my profile. Right?
Lovely.
It's this whole thing. We don't see profiles of people's faces. We don't see 3D people, right? We only see this two-dimensional front facial view. We never see profiles anymore. So sometimes like I'll have people just like show their profile and I'm like, whoa, I never thought like that you look like that from a profile. It's just, I don't know. I think it's funny. I don't know. I'm just whatever. Some people think it's funny. I think it's funny.
I think it's funny. I think it's also really funny when people meet in person and they're like, you're so tall. I'm quite tall. And so people are always shocked when they meet me and they're like, oh my gosh, you were so tall. And I was like, yeah, in the Zoom box, we're all the same height.
We are all the same height. I know. And I tell people that too. It's like, I am the 6'4", super muscly dude. Like that's how you'll know. I'm just like, no, I'm not. I'm like 5'7", and I keep trying to build my muscles, and sometimes it doesn't work. So okay, so let's move on to this idea of delegation, because delegation is a part of meetings, right? But you talk about delegation a lot as well, and I want to hit on this because it's really, really important. And you write about and speak about these 4 mistakes that managers make when delegating, and I would love to dive into those a little bit.
Yes, awesome. So I have a quiz. You can go online and check it out. I'm sure we'll put the link in the show notes. And so you can actually answer a bunch of questions and it will tell you which is your kind of delegation downfall. Like where is the place that you are making the most, getting the most stuck or making the most mistakes when it comes to delegating. So the first thing I call getting stuck in the mud. And this is where you think about delegating, you know you should delegate, you kind of get ready to delegate, and then you don't because you're like, oh, it's just going to end up taking me so much time to like actually explain something. I could just do it so much faster myself. I don't really have the right person to delegate to. And so it's like, it's just not going to work. So you kind of, you think about, but you just kind of never take action. That's the getting stuck in the mud. The second one I would say is navigating the fog. And this is where you've delegated, but you didn't actually make it very clear what you're delegating, what success looks like, giving the person the information that they need. And so there's this kind of like foggy space where they don't really know what they're supposed to do, and they're doing the best they can, and maybe they're asking some questions, but they're not going to end up giving you what you want, and then you just end up getting frustrated that they didn't do what you wanted because the reality is you actually didn't explain it very well, and you didn't give them the space to ask the right questions and to know what they needed to know. And so you kind of then afterwards, you're frustrated because they didn't do a good job and you got to fix it. They're frustrated because they feel like you didn't set me up for success, and now I'm taking the brunt of the fact that it's not good work. So that's the second one. The third is what I call the disappearing act. And this is where you delegate and you're like, I'm done. I told you what you needed to do. I gave you all this space. I'm being such a good boss and giving you, the autonomy to figure it all out on your own. And, we're good to go. So I'll see you when it's done. And that is never a good idea, unless it's somebody who you have deep trust and working relationship with, who is at a very high level, and you're on the same page and you can delegate and you just know that they will come to you if there's an issue, but you're like on the same wavelength. Most of the time when we delegate, you have to pre-plan the support system so that there are ample opportunities for them to feel like you're there, to support them, to answer their questions, to give them guidance, to give input early on before things end up going off track. And if you don't, right, the problem with just being like, I delegated, good job, tell me when it's done, is then people feel afraid to come to you with questions or with issues because they feel like, well, Mamie is trusting me to just make this happen. And I don't want to like look bad, like I couldn't handle it. So if you don't build in that support system, people can end up, feeling left alone and feeling kind of unstable in the work that they're doing. And then when they come back, maybe they got it all right and you're thrilled, or maybe it's not what you wanted. And even if it was, they still kind of felt like, phew, like a weight was lifted, as opposed to like really awesome that, this was such a good process. So that was the third one. And then the last one is now flying out of my brain, which is not so good. So I'm just going to check my notes.
That's okay. Check your notes. Because I'm sitting here thinking about sitting here thinking about this leader, right? And it's almost like there could be any combination of these when it comes down to it. And the intentionality some leader has to have in order to not have this stuff happen. Because what I see in all this stuff is somewhat of a tendency or a default. Like if we're accidental in our leadership or how we're managing people, it's easy to fall into any of these things, right? And if we don't intentionally lead, then we will definitely not clarify ourselves, right? We will definitely want to be perfectionists, and we'll definitely like not want to give control over, or we'll definitely not clarify exactly what we need from them, right? Like all these things are tendencies if we're not intentional about them.
Yes, exactly. And that is the perfect lead into the last one, which is called going freeform. And this is where you know what you want to delegate, and you sit down and you basically word vomit everything onto the person. And you haven't done the thinking ahead of time, the documentation ahead of time to be able to give someone something that they can actually use to guide them. So unlike navigating the fog, where you're not even like totally clear about anything and you're not giving people kind of enough to go on, this is almost the opposite. You're basically like just throwing it all at them at once and hoping that they can catch everything you said and figure out what you want from all of that. and kind of just and run with it. And it's never good. And I will say this is one of the ones that I used to do. I used to have a meeting with my assistant every morning, and I would just be like, here's the million things on my brain right now. Great. And be like, hope that she'd figure all that stuff out and figure out what I was talking about and figure out what was relevant. And finally, she said to me one day, she's like, this isn't really working. Like, I really don't always know if you're telling me things that I need to do or if you're just telling me things that you don't want to forget. And so I should just like add them onto your task list, or you're just telling me things because you're telling them to me. She's like, I just need like a little more guidance. And I was like, oh, wow. I did not realize that I was just like sitting down and then like, just like rapid fire, like spitballing at her. And so instead, I started taking a few minutes and I'd sit down first and I would write down, these are the things I need her to do. These are the things I need her to remind me to do. And anything else that I just want her to know about, I would make in the like, just an FYI category. And then we sit down and we'd have the same conversation, but I would say, all right, here are the 3 things I need you to work on. For this project, it's this thing, for this, whatever. Here are the things. Can you please add these to my calendar, add them to my to-do list? Please remind me this thing is coming up. I want to forget. And then other things you should just know about, X, Y, Z is happening. And it totally transformed our working relationship, and her life just got so much easier. And I was able to actually give her more because she now understood what I was asking, and she wasn't spending nearly as much energy just trying to like manage the overwhelm that she was getting from me.
That is so smart. And I totally can relate. When I was running my agency years ago, we would have these meetings, and I would come to these meetings and like, just everything in my head, right? As an introvert, there's a lot I ponder up here and think about. And then when I get the chance to unleash it, it all comes out, and then I see my team like frantically like typing, like they're just typing everything I'm saying, like all these notes, right? And then like maybe a week later, I'm like, hey, what are you guys working on? They're like, oh, working on this. Cause you said I was like, oh no, I didn't want you to work on that. Like, did you hear that in that meeting? Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, that's not what I wanted you to work. Or the opposite happens. I'll say, hey, how's that thing going? And they're like, oh, wait, you want us to work on that? And I'm like, yeah, I thought I said that in the meeting. They're like, oh, we didn't realize that that's what you meant. It's like, it was those 2 extremes that I was getting all the time, right? From my word vomit.
Yes. And we don't even realize that like that's delegation, right? We are delegating as managers and as leaders. We're delegating all the time. When we give people direction of what to work on or what to do, that's delegating. And so, yes, there's an element that's always going to be a little organic, but when it really matters, we need to be super clear. We need to have a process for how we're going to communicate it. We need to have a process for supporting it, and we need to have a process for evaluating it. And when you have all those things working, like it doesn't feel like extra work. It takes a little bit of extra effort to figure it all out. And I have a course on this, and it's one of the things I coach on. But once you're in the rhythm, right, once it's become a habit, then things just hum. And it's so beautiful. And when something goes bump in the night, because things inevitably will, it doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, the house is burning down. It feels like, oh, there's one of the burners in the kitchen caught on fire. No big deal. We can put that out.
So at the end of the day, if I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh gosh, like I got to figure this whole thing out. What's one thing that we can do to really transform meetings, right? For inside our organizations, for our people, for our culture, ultimately, like I'm going to put a lot of pressure on you to think of like that one thing, like what's one big thing that we can do?
All right. Well, I'm going to disappoint you because I'm going to give you 2 things. Because
that's not what I asked for, Mamie. I'm just kidding. Please give me 2.
I know I'm a very bad rule follower.
I love it. Go for it. 2. Right. So I want 2.
So the first one is I'm going to repeat what I said earlier because it really is that important, which is why I'm going to give you 2 because I don't want to just repeat what I said before. So the number one thing is to think about your meeting and say, what is this meeting going to accomplish? And reframing why you're having your meeting into a tangible result that will be produced by that gathering. So that could be a list, it could be a decision, it could be a plan, it could be alignment, it could be a whole bunch of stuff. And I have a whole chapter in my book all about the desired outcome. So you can learn more about it there. But that's the first thing, is just ask yourself, what will this meeting accomplish? The second thing, now here's the new thing, is at the end of your meeting to spend 5 minutes, put it on your agenda, set a timer. Outlook now has a lovely thing that pops up and tells you there's 5 minutes left in your meeting. So give yourself 5 minutes as a group and write down collectively. So digital document, in your notes app, wherever you're putting it, write down collectively as a group. What are the next steps? Who will do what by when? And you as the meeting leader don't have to be the one who's naming everything. You can ask the group. You can do a quick round robin. Who here has the next step that they're taking away from this? And what are the other next steps we need to assign to people who aren't in this room? And who's going to make sure that they know about it? So capturing those next steps, recapping the decisions that were made, and again, writing that down. We decided ABC. And if, for a little bonus, why did we decide that? What was the kind of key rationale? Super helpful for people who weren't in the meeting, who need to know, gives them some context, and also helps you if you ever need to revisit that decision to say, oh, what changed, and does our rationale still hold, or do we need to actually adjust this decision? Can save you a whole lot of time in the future from rehashing decisions that don't need to be rehashed. And then lastly, as a group, what are the key takeaways that people who weren't in this meeting need to know about? Are there any kind of ideas we want to hold for the future? Any kind of key information that we want to make sure gets shared out? And you can literally do that in 5 minutes. You can do it with the whole group, so you don't even need to have a note taker anymore in your meetings. You can just recap it as a group. And if you type it up digitally, you can hit send immediately. So when your meeting ends, there is no next step that you have to take in terms of rewriting your notes or informing people who weren't there, because you've already done it. Super helpful.
Okay. I like it. You have a podcast called The Modern Manager. So talk to us a little bit about that. What is the context of that podcast? Is it all meeting stuff? Is it like delegation stuff? Is it guest format? I mean, what is that all about? Tell us about that.
Yeah, The Modern Manager. I launched this in 2018, so it's been quite a while. And it is all about how to be an effective manager, how to create an environment where people, including yourself, get to do your best work and be your best self. So I have guests on the show. If you scroll back a bit, you'll find solo episodes where I was doing like little teachings. I don't do those anymore. Now I keep that for my membership group. So if you still want that kind of stuff, you can get it, but it's not on the public podcast. So we talk about all kinds of things, from meetings to giving feedback to dealing with conflict, delegation, to living your values, to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. I mean, really everything that is related to a manager at any level who's responsible for a group of people who need to come together to accomplish things and want to have good results and also have a good experience while they're doing it.
That sounds like something people should listen to.
I hope so. I have like 5 stars on iTunes. I get a lot of great feedback. Cool. I really try to make it actionable, and I want people to walk away feeling like they know exactly what they need to do to take action.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that it would be great if we all felt fulfilled in what we did as leaders, managers of people, and building influence and impact in some way, shape, or form. And to feel fulfilled in doing that, I think is critical to helping us feel motivated and helping motivate others, right? We can only give what we possess. And if I'm not feeling it, then I definitely am not going to be able to pass it on to others in that sense, right? So that's awesome. I love it. So you've got the book, you've got the podcast, you speak as well, and you do coaching, and you have a membership group that people can get involved with. So they can check out your website. I notice you have a bunch of free resources on there too, like this quiz we talked about on here. Like, it seems like you've got content out the wazoo. So yeah.
Oh yeah, I am a content creator at heart. So I produce a lot of stuff, and a lot of it is free. And I really hope people will come check it out.
Cool. Awesome. It's been so cool having you on the show. I am definitely going to now be very self-conscious about all my meetings going forward. So thank you very much for that. But no, about making them effective, definitely going to be doing that, right? Like I've got some popping up here on Monday that I'm going to be like, okay, I need to make sure that these people are relevant and we're got goals and we're, I mean, I got all the stuff right here. Thank you. Thank you. You rock.
Awesome. Well, I hope your meetings are wonderful going forward.
Meetings are not an event. They're a cycle. If we think about what happens before, during, after, and how that flows into our entire organization, how we operate as teams and leaders, then we will start to appreciate the idea of what a meeting is and the function that it serves within our organization. Another really, really cool, critical point was when she talked about how meetings are really just a microcosm of your entire organization. What exists in the meeting, the dynamics that happen in that meeting are probably what's happening in a grander scale inside the organization. So it's a really helpful tip to pay attention to what's happening in that meeting, because if people aren't speaking up in the meeting, they're probably not speaking up outside your organization either, creating that impact. If there's no value put in there, if there's dominating, or if there's people in the meeting sucking up all the oxygen, it's probably happening other places as well, and people aren't feeling valued, heard, and understood. That's a problem. And I love these 4 tips about delegation, these 4 different, I guess, pitfalls of delegating. Number 1, being stuck in the mud. Number 2, navigating the fog. Number 3, the disappearing act. How many of us have done that one? Not me. Yes, I have. Totally. And then going free form. I've totally done that one. Like, we have done these things, and that's what I'm saying. Accidental behavior will lead to these types of leadership things, right? And if we're not intentional, then we're going to fall into these little pitfalls, which are not good for us or the organization. So let's be leaders worth following by paying attention to our meetings and how we delegate. So thank you, Mamie, for being on the call. I appreciate you. If y'all want to find out more about me, you can go to skotwaldron.com, and I've got free resources there too. YouTube, like, subscribe, comment on there. I would love it. Super big fan of people connecting with me on LinkedIn as well. I have a lot of free content I post there. So thank you, everybody. I will see you next time on another episode of Unlocked.